Hi, my name is Chris Carroll, and I write a blog for the Oklahoman about books and reading called Bookmarking. And we're here today with a local author, Jana Hausburg. She's a cataloger with the Metropolitan Library System, and she's written an awesome book about Oklahoma heroes called It Wasn't Much, 10 True Tales of Oklahoma Heroes.
That's right, that's it.
And can you talk about where the title came from, It Wasn't Much?
Yes, there's one of the heroes is Rufino Rodriguez, and he was a miner in the early 1900s in Lehi, Oklahoma, which is now a ghost town, and he saved over 150 miners from a coal fire. And when it was an extraordinary feat of courage, and he didn't just run through and warn them, but it was hours he was spent underground. And later on, when he was asked about that day, he said, "Oh, it wasn't much," trying to, kind of say, "Mike, it wasn't such a big deal." But he saved multiple people, and the orphans and the widows who would have been there were so grateful that they weren't widows and orphans.
And that's kind of the theme of your book, right? These are just sort of ordinary people who did awesome things through the history of Oklahoma.
Yeah, an extraordinary event. You wouldn't have detracted from them if they hadn't acted that way. If he, for example, had left with the rest of the people when they were warned of the fire, you wouldn't have said, "Oh, what a coward." But he did act in this extraordinary way. So what we wanted to do is, the publishing company is called 46 Star Press, and we're featuring Oklahoma stories and telling them to Oklahoma's children. So the book is written for 4th to 9th grade, and we're hoping it'll be used a lot by school libraries when the kids are doing their reports on Oklahoma history.
I also think it's a fantastic gift idea for Christmas, and I think parents would enjoy reading it too. But can you talk about, one of my favorite chapters was about Ruth Brown, the formidable librarian. Can you talk a little bit about her story?
Sure. That would have to be my favorite chapter because I'm also a librarian at the Metropolitan Library System, cataloger. And Ruth Brown was a wonderful, courageous woman. I think she's tackled segregation in 1950 before the actual civil rights movement. And she wanted to make the library accessible to all the community, not just the white community. And she got fired for that. But it was something that was very important to her, and she referenced Richard Wright's book, I think it was Black Boy. And it really made an impact on her, and she wanted to make sure that everyone who wanted to read had the freedom to read and had the freedom to use the library. And for that, she lost her job.
And she was accused of being a communist sympathizer, and her name was really dragged through the mud.
That was an interesting story. There's a story in there how one of the photographs was taken, and I think it's in there, how this photograph made it into the newspaper, and there's a mystery behind. No one really knows how they got into the library, and it was almost as if someone had placed this book on a stack of books to frame her. So she's really neat. I love her.
How did you come across these stories, or how did you do your research for the book?
My friend Buddy Johnson works in the Oklahoma collection for the library system, and he's also a historian, has collected stories over the years. And he noticed that there's so many wonderful stories that we just don't have any material on for kids, for Oklahoma's kids. And he asked me if I'd be interested in writing the book. And I said, sure. And he already had the information. He had articles, he had the people down, so it was easy for me. I would read the information, compile. I tried to put an interesting narrative at the beginning of each chapter to bring the reader in, and it was a lot of fun.
There's lots of interesting extra information too at the end of each chapter about each hero. There's websites to go to, suggestions for other books to read,
right,
and places to visit.
If you go to 46 Star Press, and that's on the back of the book.
Is it 46 Star Press?
46starpress.com. Yes.
Okay.
You can click on the book, and each chapter has additional materials for educators, kids who might be in the Gifted and Talented program, parents who are interested in taking a tour of Oklahoma and wanting to visit these different places of interest. We have activities, puzzles and games, things like that for the younger kids.
Cool.
So we try to put a lot of thought into it. to see what would help educators out.
And there's also really neat portraits of each one of the heroes in your book. Can you talk about who the artist was?
The artist is a graduate from Southern Nazarene University, like I am, and she's also my sister. She's a wonderful artist, always had a lot of talent, and she offered to help us out. This is our first book with the publishing company, and one of my favorite portraits is one of Rosemary. Rosemary Hogan was a nurse in World War II, and she just captured a lot of her grit and spunk. She also enjoyed drawing Stanley Rother. He's the priest.
Oh, yeah.
And one thing I noticed when I was looking through the table of contents to make sure I remembered some of the, because it's been a while since I've written this and I'm writing another one now, all of these heroes have an R in their name.
Huh. And what's your next book going to be about?
It's on Oklahoma outlaws and lawmen.
Cool.
So we haven't got a title yet, but we're working on it.
So what's the best way to buy your book?
Go to the website, or you can Google my name, Jana Hausburg, and it'll come up. We also have it on Amazon.